Welcome to Red Carpet Healthcare Solutions, hosted by Dr. Ryan Morley and Travis Buzzell. Join us on this journey as we educate the patient population, inform today's medical providers, and inspire tomorrow's medical leaders through education and in-depth discussions. We can all discover today's best healthcare solutions. Now, sit back and enjoy Red Carpet Healthcare Solutions Private Practice Podcasters.
Hey everybody, welcome to Red Carpet Healthcare Solutions Private Practice Podcasters. I'm your host, Dr. Ryan Sawbones-Molly, along with my co-host,
Travis Buzzell.
And tonight we've got a great episode. It's very, very fitting for kind of the conversations that have been going on behind the scenes, some personal things that I've posted recently on LinkedIn, physician wellness, physician burnout, physician suicide, and couldn't be a more appropriate guest, I think.
Yeah, no, I think the stars really aligned on this. Before we kind of got started, we were talking a little bit offline just about sort of the timeline here. So our guest today is, he's a physician, he's a healthcare advocate, and an author. It seems like there's not a lot that this guy up in Michigan doesn't do. So please welcome Dr. Todd Otten.
Thanks for having me, gentlemen.
Doc, how are you?
It's great. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here. I appreciate you.
No, absolutely. So, we kind of like to start the podcast with just a little bit of background, a little bit about, who you are, where you're from, how you got into medicine. And, obviously, we know that you're very passionate about, kind of the current state of healthcare, which is not great in a lot of these conversations. And I know that you've done a lot of work behind the scenes to, sort of bring this to light and engage in that sort of conversation. So if you could sort of give us the 30,000 foot view.
You say 10, I say
We've
30.
argued about this a little bit. Yeah. I mean, it's a broad view, but yeah, if you could just kind of tell us a little bit about you and how we got here.
For sure. So I'll give you the quick and dirty version here, I suppose. Family physician. Really two key moments in my career came after I came back from the Navy. The first was in 2019. I went through really horrendous burnout. I went from loving my job and loving seeing patients to literally hating it, sitting in the backyard in tears, not wanting to do it anymore. Fortunately, I had a little bit of time off. My CEO had the foresight to give me a break, and I took it, came back. Really took about 2 years to recover from that. That's when I started writing. And then there was another key moment in August of 2022. A new CEO and a VP came to my office and said, "Hey, we got a great idea. We're going to move you back to the town where you got burned out because we can save money on rent." And I was in a position not to take that, so I literally resigned the next morning. I'd been there for almost 13 years at that point, and from there went on quite an amazing journey of networking and advocacy. Published a book, and now we're working on a project with a documentary really intended to pull the curtain back on how corporate greed is destroying medicine in the United States, adversely affecting mental health of clinicians, top to bottom, and frankly, killing people. And we're excited about it. It's really taken on a life of its own, and I guess that's the 25,000 foot view. Maybe it was the 40,000. I'm not sure.
I think it's a nice kind of like you've laid some groundwork. I mean, we share a little bit. We were talking a little bit before we started recording about where you train, where you're from, where you live, and the fact that we both kind of trained in the same healthcare system, the St. John healthcare system. I was there 2005 to 10. You said you were there, 2007 to?
2007 to 2009. I got a little bit of credit for my time in the Navy. So
okay.
Residency was truncated by 6 months for me.
Gotcha. And I guess I'm really interested to just dive into, what did you do when you first came out of residency? Did you join a private practice? Was it an employed position? What did that look like?
For sure. So I Having had experience in the Navy, I started looking for a job well in advance. I think I had about 18 months to go on residency when I started my job search because I wanted to go to a position that I would stay at. I didn't want to have to go to one job and then go to another and go to another and all these things. And I was looking for autonomy. I was looking for leadership roles. And so I ended up going to a small critical access hospital in Charlotte, Michigan called Hayes Green Beach. And most of the time there was amazing. Frankly, and I was employed to answer that part of the question. The wheels really started coming off the bus when we got taken over by a bigger system. A lot of the groundwork that had been laid with our ACO work and the culture we had developed around the quadruple aim um, kind of went out the window. And that's really when things went south. And ultimately, that led to my departure a few years later.
So what was that timeline? So how long were you there?
I was there a total of 13 years, and
Wow.
I think we got assumed about 8 years after I was there, 8 or 9 years after I was there was when we joined a larger system. And, you hope that you can bring some of the amazing things that you've done to the bigger system, but it was almost like we were talking to a wall. They had their way of doing things, very top down, siloed approach, and didn't want to be heard or didn't want, to hear us rather. And so, yeah, total time there was 13 years. But again, most of it was great. I really enjoy seeing patients. It was all the other stuff that we all get sick of, the box clicking, the paperwork, the prior auths, the list goes on and on and on that ultimately led to, really, I took a stand, to be honest with you, Ryan. I was in a position to stand up for myself, stand up for my colleagues, and I did. And it's led to this amazing journey that I'm on now.
I guess even a step back, like what first prompted you to even want to get into medicine? Do you have a family member that's in medicine? Did you have an injury or an illness that exposed you to medicine, or when did you first know?
Well, no, actually, neither of those things. It was kind of at the time I thought it was related to my love of science and really enjoying interacting with others. I was a Parks and Rec supervisor for a handful of years, doing games with kids and building crafts and all that kind of stuff. And I really enjoyed it. And I was like, I was a overachiever, I guess. And so, what do you think? Lawyer, doctor, engineer, stockbroker, what are those things? The other ones didn't seem as quite as exciting. So I figured I might as well go shoot for the moon and try and get into medical school. Interestingly, though, in retrospect, I think some of that decision was around unresolved trauma as a kid. I was bullied pretty relentlessly in grade school, probably in part because I reacted. And kids pick on you if you continue to react, and that was never really addressed. And so I think that subconsciously was a big driver. And as you know, in medical school, we're taught to just stuff everything in a box,
Yeah.
which is also a really bad habit. Um, and so for me, that box got opened last year, and oh boy, was that an interesting journey in and of itself. But I digress.
Well, I think it's interesting because I equate, my residency, and I wasn't in any armed forces, in any military experience, but to me, what I've heard and what you kind of see depicted on movies and read in books about the military and sublimation of your thoughts, your feelings, your this, your that, and it's just grind, 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 like mind over matter. You had two of those, right? So you had your time in the Navy, and then your experience in medical school and residency, and then practice.
And so multiple episodes of brainwashing occurred for me. So, but and there's good parts to that too, right? I mean, the ability to stay in the moment and give the person in front of you your best. I mean, that's critical. I think the thing that was lacking in multiple arenas for me was how to process some of that trauma that you experience, whether it's work related, whether it's personal, whether it's a death. I think that's critical, and we've got to talk about that too. And frankly, I'll digress again. I'm working on another project around trauma and the amount of trauma within our healthcare system right now. whether you're a patient, a provider of some sort, or really any role. It's everywhere. I did describe intergenerational trauma, even how we train physicians. The concept of pimping, during the operating, being in the operating room, at times is a bit sadistic, I would say.
Yeah.
So anyway,
It's it's kind of crazy. You're talking about a lot of the things as like the non-physician in the conversation. I think about this stuff. I think about it like, my sisters are teachers. My wife is a teacher. Dr. Molly's wife is a teacher. And, I think about, like physicians and like these different sort of, careers and things that people do. It's like, you see some really messed up stuff, right? Whether it's like a patient has a bad outcome or some just great person gets a horrible diagnosis or like just like crappy stuff happens every day, right? And like then you're supposed to just go home, pretend like none of that stuff happened, and then just get up to the next day and go do it again. It's like, I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, but they said my sister does emotional support with young kids, and like it just breaks my heart even thinking about it. Like on the physician side, I know just the day-to-day stuff. It's not always rainbows and butterflies and helping people. Sometimes there are just certain people that can't be helped, or things that are just out of our control. But like the idea that you just like, okay, and walk out and then just go right into the next room like, hey, how we doing? You're doing better than the person next to you. Like I just find it hard as a person that like how do you deal with that? Like how does that
it's like an
you know-
on-off switch. I
you
mean,
know
it's
what I
just
mean?
like the way I've always dealt with it is, each patient, each surgery is like its own project for me. Like that's how I would get through it.
Yeah.
And it's just like, all right, like here's my task, right? I have a knee replacement or I have a hip replacement. And, each task is a little different clinically, but then there's the psychological piece to it too. So it's like this task may be this big, but the surgery piece is this big. And then the next one, it's a much harder surgery, but maybe it's an easier patient to deal with. And it's, you turn that page, right? It's like once you go to that next case or the next patient, you almost have to just forget whatever happened in that last room and move on to what's going on in this room. And then when you leave that room, you get some heavy stuff. Fortunately for what I do, I don't have a lot of that as an orthopedic surgeon. I mean, there's trauma, there's, history with certain things. So I have a little bit of that counseling aspect. I feel like a lot of that is post-surgical when you're just trying to talk people off the ledge. Like, hey, you're doing fine. Like, you can't compare yourself to Sally who had her knee replacement done 2 years before you, or even 2 weeks before you. Like each person's different. But I mean, I'm really interested, Todd, to get to kind of some of the deeper stuff, because I feel like this is going to be a little heavier podcast than some of our other ones with just some of the projects that you're working on. I mean, when Marty Nichols reached out to me and kind of suggested that we connect, and he sent me your trailer for Suck It Up Buttercup. It was almost very, very fitting and just ironic that the first voice I heard and then the first face I see was Wendy Dean. And I met Wendy it was back in January of this year. There was about 6 of us physicians that from kind of Pennsylvania, we all went to State College. Just, hey, let's go to the center of the state. Let's meet. We know that there's this issue that we're all dealing with in different aspects of our careers and practices, but how can we start trying to solve some of these physician burnout, physician suicide issues, and just the displeasure for practicing medicine? I mean, it's broken, right? And it seems seems a lot overwhelming when you've got this massive system that has so many different reasons attached to it that have caused it to fail. And I mean, we can start diving into those, but when you mentioned in 2019, you went through a period of burnout, and I feel like we've all been through that at some point. Last year, I was very burned out last year. Do you mind sharing kind of your experience? I mean, you can go into whatever comfort level you are.
Oh yeah, sure. I'll be glad to get into it. Wow, it had been building for months. That lack of compassion, that anger at times, that short-tempered, the frustrations with paperwork. Um, And I was also suffering from some, personal post-concussive headaches, um, as a result of having a bout of cluster headaches. I don't know if you've known anyone that's had cluster headaches, but they are nicknamed the suicide headaches.
Ooh.
And literally, I would be between patients with an oxygen mask on my face to try and get pain relief because high flow oxygen was the only thing that gave me relief. It was miserable. It was I don't wish that on anyone. Um, and so fast forward, that period was accelerated, I suppose, maybe the right word, when I had some pay withheld because I had two open charts, really. Like I had three, I think it was about 3 grand withheld and I was chief of staff at the time and I was the ACO medical director. I'm like, what in the hell are we doing here? Like literally an MA had to check a box in both of these charts. I'm not kidding, Ryan. I think it took 60 seconds to close both charts. I
Wow.
appealed it and I don't know if they were making a stand or what they were trying to do. But anyways, so at that point, the wheels came off the bus. I'm like, that's it. You think you can do a better job as chief of staff? Do it yourself. I quit. I resigned like every leadership position I had. I was ready to quit. I mean, it was really, really bad. And actually, for those interested in understanding how the dynamics of that are, that's actually one of the chapters in Ripple of Change is called Anatomy of Burnout. And it really takes a look at how does burnout affect not just the physician or the clinician, but all those concentric circles around your family, your friends, your colleagues, you know, people further out, and then least of which the patients. I mean, it negatively impacts thousands of people depending on the role that you're playing. It was a mess. It was a complete mess. And honestly, it took me probably a good 2 years to really recover from that. When I came back after having 3 months off, I was broken. I was not the same confident young physician that I had been. It was very difficult. There was, a lot
So
of
you took
people.
like a 3 month leave.
I did, and that was a result of my CEO who really stuck his neck out for me. I hear of other circumstances like this where a physician's labeled as disruptive, or they're sent away, or they find some reason to get rid of you. He stood up for me, and that meant a lot. And we're actually still really good friends to this day.
When you
And
say
he was
CEO of the hospital or of your practice?
CEO of the hospital.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, he's a good man, and he wasn't the CEO that came in and told me I was moving back to the town where I'd gotten burned out. That was a different CEO after an evolution had occurred. But yeah, it's very very painful, and that's really just one of the drivers for me. There's a couple other the daily frustrations of patients got to be overwhelming at times. I'd be hearing more complaints about the system and the hospital and all these other things that I had little control over. But also during my career, I've had 4 colleagues die by suicide. A friend from medical school, a fellow when I was in residency, one of my partners, and then a young ER physician. And I'll tell you what, the partner one I think was the one that in retrospect hit me the most because I was gotten so good at compartmentalizing. Literally, I went to the funeral, cried, and then went and saw patients the next day. I mean, that's insane. I worked side by side with this guy for 3 or 4 years. I had no idea he struggled, didn't even grieve it, and just kept working. And there was like no resources for it. It was just disgusting. The whole thing was disgusting. So yeah, that's and this, Ryan, this is all over the place. These kinds of stories.
We just
It's
had a general surgeon commit suicide last Thursday.
oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Sorry.
And I did not personally know him. I knew of him. But small community hospital, my hometown where I grew up, 12,000 people. And, Travis and I have talked about this on every episode of this podcast. And I have a second podcast that I do that's a little bit more lighthearted. And I talk about physician burnout, physician suicide in pretty much every episode of that too, because there's some business conversations that go on too. And you hear about this. I had a fellow orthopedic surgeon who practices up in the Metro Detroit area. His son committed suicide a couple years ago. He was only 14, and my wife and I have 3 boys, and my wife's grandmother committed suicide, when her father was young. So everybody knows somebody, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like it feels like it just is getting closer and closer and closer. And then when you're hearing all these statistics of physicians, now taking over the number 1 spot that was previously held by the dentist for physician suicides. And then, I have this perception that orthopedic surgeons, we have the greatest job in the world. We're so happy. We love what we do. And 28.2% of physician suicides are orthopedic surgeons. It's like, it's getting real close to home. And I posted something yesterday on this. I don't know if you saw it on LinkedIn or if you're on LinkedIn, but it was easily the most powerful post with the most engagement that I've ever had. And it's been just a little over 24 hours. Was met with a little bit of additional unnecessary drama, which we can maybe get into a little bit later, but from a colleague actually that was very angry with my post, and still trying to process all that. But
Interesting. Now, I can't say that I saw it, but now I'm super intrigued, especially with that last comment.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interject there.
No. I mean, I might as well just share it right now, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not throwing anybody under the bus. I'm not going to say names. I'm not going to say if it was a guy or a girl, but this individual physician was, so I posted it on LinkedIn. A couple hours later, posted it on Facebook. I don't have a personal Facebook page, but we have a business one. So Jay, who you were talking to earlier, who does all of our podcast editing and everything, he runs our business Facebook page. So I sent him the LinkedIn post and the accompanying photo, which I had AI generated. It was a bunch of physicians standing around a coffin, white coats and scrubs, somber day, somber post. And it essentially just talked about the issue that I don't think a lot of lay people, patients, really know about. And it was heavy. And at the very end, I didn't name the physician that committed suicide, didn't name whether it was a guy or girl. I just said it was a general surgeon. I didn't say the hospital. I didn't say anything.
It was very vague.
It was very vague. And it wasn't the point of the post. The point of the post was like, we need to do something now. This is getting out of control. And it was a PS. I literally, PS, by the way, this hit really close to home recently because of general surgeon. Well, I'm getting all these positive comments from people that I know from my hometown community, previous patients of mine, current patients of mine, all very supportive. And then all of a sudden, I get a text message because I was actually going for a walk yesterday morning and got a text message from one of my employees saying, "Hey, doc, just wanted to let you know there was a very rude comment that was left on your Facebook page. Do you want me to have it deleted?" And so I'm like, "Oh, what was this about?" I'm like, "What could be rude?" Like, pulled it up, and it was a physician who I actually went to medical school with, graduated same class with this physician, and this physician happens to be the chief medical officer at a local community hospital. So, and his exact words, probably easier if I just pull it up. And this is where Jay's going to have to edit some stuff out. And quite frankly, my mom read it yesterday, so we're probably not going to edit anything out. But fuck you, Ryan Molly. This post crossed the line. You are such a narcissist damn prick. And I was blown away. I initially thought, is this person drunk? Is this really this person? Like, what's going on? What prompted this response? So I just crafted a very professional, "I'm sorry you misinterpreted this." I'm not, like the whole reason I brought this up was just I've been a physician advocate for many, many years. I've talked about physician suicide for well over 2 years in every single podcast episode. I'm not sure where your anger, where your comments are coming from. And I also commented about how this individual helped my father out, actually was walking through the hospital 6 months ago to get some testing done. And this individual, the CMO, kind of pulled my father aside and then reached out to me and was like, "Hey, Ryan, I just want to let you know I saw your dad. He was really struggling. I told him he should go to the ER. It looked like he was short of breath. I didn't know if he was having a heart attack." So I was like very appreciative. I thanked him. So I thanked him in my response, even though he was a total jerk to me. And then he wrote a couple more very nasty lines after that. And about an hour later, it was, and some patients had commented and just totally called him out, right? Because it was a complete inappropriate response. And all of a sudden the post gets deleted. And then I get a text message from this physician. "I was 100% in the wrong. I'm so sorry." And quite frankly, I guarantee that was people higher up the food chain that heard about it, saw it, and said, "You need to delete that immediately and you need to reach out and apologize." But to me, and I had talked to Travis about this yesterday, it was just like, and then I go to church while this whole thing is in my head swirling. And I'm just like, how do I respond to this person? And I had already responded on Facebook publicly. I was like, I can't respond because I'm gonna go down a rabbit hole and it's gonna get argumentative, I feel like, because I'm a very passionate guy. I'm not gonna stop talking about this. I didn't talk about this individual at all. There was no patient identifying or physician identifying factors. And I'm still just trying to process it.
Well, a few things come to my mind. I'm sorry, Travis, did I cut you off?
No, no, I was just, I mean, to me, a part of that conversation yesterday was like, you know, like what happened? Like, I get it, right? I mean, physicians are people too, they're very competitive people. They want to help, think about it. These are the people that sacrifice, probably more training than, probably any other profession out there, right? Before like you actually step into the arena. And it's like we don't have to be best friends, but I hear
It's
you
a
guys,
competing hospital, I think, is kind of what you're getting at.
yeah,
Right?
but it's just the Hippocratic Oath, right? Do no harm. But it's just like, what happened to just tearing each other down? Like, take we're humans too. Like, what happened to just being decent, just being kind? Like, these are very basic things that as children we've learned, right? Like, I get it. You can have a raw emotional response, and I think a lot of where that's coming from is misplaced anger and maybe perhaps even some jealousy, and there's a lot of things that you can take from that. But it's just like, how did we get here, man? Like, this is not.
We're in this together. We're physicians, and maybe we're at competing hospitals. And I used to bring all my surgeries there, and we ended up having our own physician-owned hospital. That's where we bring all of our joints to. So they lost about 1,000 joint replacements, like with a snap of a finger. So I can see how there could be some hard feelings there from a business perspective, but
it's just disheartening. Like, I don't know, to me, with just something so somber, and there's such a message that, to be honest with you, and Dr. Otten, I've read it and I've been having these conversations, right, on the podcast, and I know it a little bit differently because I know Dr. Molly, personally, outside of, the day-to-day stuff. And it's like, I know it's very sincere. I know it's very passionate. And it's just like, okay, like, I don't know, like, where something like that comes from, or a response like that. It's just like, man, it's to me, it's just ugly, and it's like, these are supposed to be like thought leaders. These are people that, other professionals look to for, advice and guidance. And it's just like,
the way I look at it is like, we're both physicians.
Yeah.
And I was advocating for physicians and physician wellness. Like, it just made zero sense to me. So sorry, Todd, but what's your analysis here?
That's okay. There's about 1,000 things we could talk about right here. I think it speaks to the level of dysfunction on a big scale, where you're trying to put something out there, trying to put somewhat of a positive spin, or at least bring it to people's attention that might not be aware. And it's seen as this divisive action, probably completely unrelated to some other form of trauma or business disagreement or whatever the case may be. And the level of frustration is such that people's fuse is so small that they'll lose control at times. And I think this is a perfect example of that. Unfortunately, I also think that talking about it is the absolute right thing to do. I've heard many instances where these events are swept under the rug and not talked about, and no one knows what really happened. And it's gotten to this point where it's so commonplace for physicians that you were talking about Wendy Dean earlier, and I'm derailing myself a little bit here, I suppose. But she writes about the canaries in the coal mine, right? And the physicians for a while, we've been the canaries in the coal mine. If you go back to those old mining days, I don't know if the two of you know, they used to take a canary down so that if the oxygen level dropped and you saw the canary dead, you knew to get out of the mine. I mean, the fact that physicians are killing themselves at a rate of about one per day in the United States is a huge, huge red flag. And the issue is we shouldn't be arguing with one another,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
From one hospital to the next, or fighting over patients when access is a major issue right now. People can't get in, be seen.
Yeah. There's
just 'cause
plenty of business to
Plenty.
go around.
Totally, totally. We need to be thinking about the legacy institutional things that have been created over the preceding X amount of decades that are perpetuating the status quo. And we've got to learn how to work together. I truly believe we've got to learn how to bring the patient voice into this to really facilitate massive change. And actually, that's part of what I wrote Ripple of Change for, was to inspire and empower the American healthcare consumer to play their part in turning this around. The documentary is taking it to another level in that regard. We're looking towards a call to action, how we can activate the 300 million people who are frustrated and angry with what's going on to unwind some of the mess. And so I applaud you for taking, putting that post out rather, but then I also applaud you for not reacting to that negative comment. When I first started posting on LinkedIn, and I used the word provider, and I don't know if you're aware, but there's a whole subset of our colleagues that
Oh, yeah.
detest that word.
Yeah. We are
Like,
physicians. We are not
vi-
providers,
vi-
right?
I get it, viscerally detest it. And I get it. I understand it. In the context of what I was writing, I was trying to find a word. So I wrote about the quadruple aim, which, if you're not familiar, patient experience, quality care, lower costs, and then clinician wellness or physician wellness. Or the way I used it was provider wellness, because I wanted to include the people that made your meals, cleaned
Right.
up your room, checked you in. They're all
Everybody,
providing
the
some
team.
level of what's that?
The team, everybody.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And you're getting a little limited when you're trying to encapsulate everybody with one word. Oh, and oh boy, some of the comments I got, I had to just take a step back. So at one point, one of them borderline accused me of being a Nazi, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole. I'm going to thank you for your comment and say I'm just trying to do good things and wish you well and walk away. So yeah, I think you did the right thing.
Well, as my wife kind of pointed out, and I talked to Travis, I have some other sounding boards that I talk to. And anytime that you start talking about or putting yourself out there on any type of social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever it may be, you are, and I'm not trying to equate this to Ryan Molly or Todd Otten being a celebrity, but when you're a physician, your standards are, our standards are higher, right? Like, we're under a microscope more frequently with people, and we're supposed to, do no harm. And that's what we try to do all the time, right? But anytime that you become vocal on any type of platform, you're going to have people that really support you, and you're going to have haters. So I've accepted that. And when you start talking about challenging, difficult conversations like physician suicide, as you mentioned, no one wants to talk about that, right? Let's just let's move on to the next topic. It's like, that's exactly the problem. We've been moving on to the next topic for so long. Like, yeah, it's uncomfortable. Yeah, it's awkward. No one wants to talk about it, but we can't ignore it anymore. Like you said, one doc per day killing themselves, 2 times the general population is another stat that I heard. We're beyond that now. We need to talk about this, and we need to talk about it a lot until we can reverse this trend, because we already have a physician shortage, and in the future, we're in big, big trouble. I mean, in the next couple of years, it's going to burst, and maybe it needs to burst. But if we're going to start killing ourselves at this massive rate, like we already are, that's going to accelerate things even further. So it's like
Yeah.
not talking about it isn't working. It just isn't.
No, I agree, and I think we need to take it to the next level and beyond those intimately involved with healthcare, regardless of the role. We need the whole country to be aware of what's going on, and this is just one of many layers of things that need to be addressed um, in our system because the dysfunction's top to bottom. The exodus of physicians and nurses and everyone else is unreal at this point. Ryan, I stepped away from direct patient care. I was 46 at the time.
Wow.
46.
That's how old I am right now.
And I loved seeing patients. Um, but in the last 2.5 years, my direct care has been very limited. I do a little bit with the group I work with now, but we can't have 46-year-old physicians walking away, let alone dying by suicide. And I just think that speaks to the level of dysfunction that's been imposed upon all of us. These compressed interactions, this fee for service environment, prioritizing profits over people, it's completely out of hand. Trying to justify, I won't get into specific names necessarily, but big insurance companies trying to pacify their shareholders rather than taking care of the human beings that they're supposed to be taking care of. That is what are we doing?
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing?
As a disclaimer, this podcast is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is formed. The use of this information and the materials linked to this podcast is at the user's own risk. The content on this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice from any medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professional from any such conditions.